Hello? Hey. Hello? Hey, Clara, I can't get through. I think the phone line's been cut.
How?
Well, I guess, like when the ROK6 broke through, it must have been cut.
But what happened to the Glosters?
I don't know what happened to the Glosters. April 29th, 1951. For weeks, UN Command has been wondering when the huge Chinese spring offensive they've been fearing might or will hit them. They can wonder no more, for it hits them right now. I'm Indy Neidell, and this is the Korean War. Last week, everything on the lines was quiet. Unusually quiet. Suspiciously quiet. And then, as the week ended, that huge Chinese spring offensive began. In other news, Douglas MacArthur, recently removed from command of the UN forces in East Asia, gave his farewell speech to an adoring America. Actually, US President Harry Truman made a big show of ignoring MacArthur and even said he didn't watch the address on TV. He did, of course, and called it nothing but a bunch of bullshit. He figures once all the noise dies down, people will see MacArthur for who he really is. There's plenty to talk about that happens after that speech, but I will get to that next week, for this week of the war is a week of action, and more action in the field as the huge Chinese offensive kicks into high gear. I should also point out that though I sometimes use as many as a dozen sources when putting together a week of the war, this week I have leaned heavily on Billy Mossman's Ebb and Flow, simply because it's the best account of the specific action on the ground during the offensive that I have found. Okay, this is the general plan for the offensive. It has Seoul as an immediate objective, since Chinese Commander Peng Dehuai has promised, or reportedly promised, the city to Mao Zedong as a present for May Day, International Workers' Day, May 1st. Peng has nearly 300,000 men in the 3rd, 4th, and 19th Army groups planning to converge on Seoul. 19th is in the west, attacking to the southeast from above the Imjin River as far east as where it meets the Hantan River. Between the Imjin and Cheorwon, the 3rd Army Group is to advance. East of them, the 9th Army Group attacks out of Kimhwa along and around Route 3. There are auxiliary attacks on the flanks planned and an attack east of the Hwachon Reservoir by North Korean forces hoping to break through to Chonchon and Hongcheon. The attacks began the 22nd, as last week ended, with the very first attacks hitting ROK-6 Division at 8 p.m. ROK is the South Koreans. It hasn't had time to fully develop defensive positions, with the attack coming with so little warning. So within minutes, its divisions are in full flight, abandoning weapons and vehicles. The New Zealand artillery support does manage to withdraw down the Kapyong River intact to just north of the 27th Commonwealth Brigade. ROK 6 Division Commander Chang Do-yong has lost communications with his 3 regimental commanders, and it takes him until around dawn the 23rd to gather like 2,500 men, some 16 kilometers south of the original front. That depth is also how far the flanks of U.S. 24th Division and U.S. 1st Marine Divisions have been exposed to Chang's west and east. The Marines get a little lucky that night, since the PVA, Chinese 40th Army, advances deep along the flank, but maybe unaware of the opportunity, does not exploit the situation and only makes a few local frontal assaults, which are contained. The morning of the 23rd, as this week starts, U.S. 9th Corps Commander William Hogue orders ROK 6 to head north like 5 kilometers from where they are to the Kansas line, and orders 1st Marine Division to pull back to the Pukan River, which, if they can do it, will keep control of the Hwachon Dam and link the 2 divisions. U.S. 24th Division was attacked the 22nd at 9 p.m., as I mentioned last week. The attack hits right at the division's center, and by morning the 23rd, the Chinese have driven like 5 kilometers through, though they are then contained. Attacks against U.S. 25th Division really hit the Turkish brigade hard around midnight. The Turkish position is in dire straits by the dawn, and they are ordered to leave the line and head south of the Hantan River. The 35th Infantry comes out of the reserve to relieve them. The Corps' other 2 regiments, 24th and 27th, are ordered to withdraw. The Chinese do not follow any of these withdrawals, so that sector goes quiet. Robert Sowell looks at his U.S. 3rd Division's positions and thinks that his most vulnerable sector is by the Imjin, where an enemy penetration could maybe cut Route 33 and endanger the 65th Infantry to the north. To try to preempt this, the Belgian battalion is on low Hill 194 above the river along its 90-degree bend. The Chinese attack at midnight the 22nd, hitting the Philippine 10th Battalion combat team attached to 65th Infantry and driving them out of their positions. Although the two attacking divisions do not take more ground that night, and the Filipinos recover the lost ground in the morning. But the withdrawal of the Turkish brigade just to the east uncovers 65th's flank, so that's in danger. The Belgians are attached to the 29th Independent Infantry Brigade, and they're also hit near midnight the 22nd. A Chinese patrol manages to penetrate the gap between the British and Belgians and takes 2 bridges on the Belgians' access route. The patrol then attacks the Northumberland Fusiliers to the south. The Fusiliers withdraw the morning of the 23rd, and the Chinese reinforce the guys attacking the Belgians. So by now, the Chinese have a lot of ground between the British and Belgians and a lot of men in it. The Glosters, a few kilometers away on the brigade's left, fight a costly battle the whole night and are forced to withdraw. The Chinese, though, being hit hard by covering fire, go to ground and await further reinforcements. The 23rd, 8th Army Commander Jim Van Fleet gets busy trying to restore the lines. He orders 1st and 9th Corps to withdraw, since the flight of ROK 6th Division has made their positions tenuous, and orders all Corps commanders to prepare defense in-depth positions at the Kansas line. All planned advances for the 24th are cancelled. East of Hwacheon Reservoir come attacks as well by the KPA, the North Koreans. KPA 45th Division does not make much headway against the 32nd Infantry just by the reservoir, but KPA 6th Division hits ROK 3rd Corps hard, pushing them back from Route 24 and kind of opening a path to Inje. There's a bigger threat to Inje, though, by the KPA 12th Division, who strike at the boundary between 10th Corps and ROK 3rd Corps, also at midnight the 22nd, driving 2 ROK regiments back by morning nearly to Inje, but Min Ki-shik, commanding ROK 5th Division, manages to organize a defense line by the evening. All of that happens in like the first 12 hours of the offensive. The afternoon of the 23rd, it's still ROK 6th Division that has fared the worst, and Chang Do-yong cannot get his forces forward to the Kansas line by dusk. So Corps Commander Hogue orders 27th Commonwealth Brigade to block the Kapyong River behind the ROK to prevent the enemy from bypassing them and cutting Route 17 at Kapyong Town. They set up north of the town above a bend in the river where they can cover both that river valley and the Pukhan River Valley nearby. The brigade is currently under Brian Burke as Basil Coed is in Hong Kong. The ROK 6 not making it to the Kansas line is also bad for the U.S. 1st Marine Division. They're set up from the reservoir along down the Pukhan, but there's a 12-kilometer gap between them and 27 Brigade, which means the Chinese could aim towards Chuncheon and maybe cut them off. I get that all this is confusing, so I'll make it worse. 1st Corps, for the most part, is managing to get back to Kansas line, though some units are doing so under fire. But how the heck do you get the Belgians out of the Imjin angle? Well, Sowell orders 1st Battalion from 7th Infantry to attack Hill 257 from the south, which will hopefully open the bridge area for vehicles. The fight for Hill 257 goes on all day the 23rd, and though 1st Battalion does not clear it, they do manage to open the way for the Belgian vehicles to vacate the premises by 8 p.m., and the Belgian foot traffic wades the Imjin and meets up with them near the Route 33, Route 11 junction. 1st Battalion, 7th Infantry then manages to disengage from Hill 257 and goes into the reserve. As for the Gloster Battalion, the day of the 23rd is fairly quiet for them near Sault-Marie, but the PVA 64th and 63rd Armies have built up force before them and on their flanks, and when Route 5Y, their supply line, is hit that afternoon, it's pretty clear that they have been surrounded. Given this penetration and the buildup of Chinese below the Imjin in the west, and given in particular the frail central position of the ROK 6th Division and open ground on either side of it, which invited envelopments both east and west, it was doubtful that the 1st and 9th Corps lines, as they stood at dark on the 23rd, could be held against the next surge of enemy attacks. A number of officers had recommended long withdrawals to General Van Fleet to gain time to organize stronger defenses, but Van Fleet had refused to give ground voluntarily in deep withdrawals. While by no means assuming a stand-or-die position, the enemy, he insisted, would have to take all he gets. So, that's like the first full day of the Chinese spring offensive. There are many more days in the week, though. In the 1st Marine Division sector, the enemy pours through the ground vacated by ROK 6th Division, but does not make a path to Chonchon through the Marines. Sure, they hit the 1st and 7th Marines hard, and when the Marines begin withdrawing to the Kansas line the 24th, they enter Huachon town, but they don't really follow the withdrawal. 120th Division from PVA 40th Army does engage the rearguard battalions and does harass them all the way to the line, even under airstrikes, during which they shoot down 4 UN planes, but they've been weakened enough that they can't really assault the line itself. And from the morning of the 25th, there are no more real assaults here. East of the Marines, the KPA 12th Division again hits ROK 5th Division mid-morning the 24th, and this time takes Inja. KPA 6th Division is still pushing back ROK 3rd Corps, but some 6 kilometers south of Inja, the ROK manages to make a defense line that prevents the salient from growing. The inexperienced KPA 45th Division to the northeast is again unsuccessful the 23rd, and has a disaster when some 400 of them assemble in a draw in full view of a UN artillery spotter who calls down 15 volleys on them. Afterwards, the spotter sees 2 North Koreans leave the draw. On the 25th, a counterattack by ROK 5th Division retakes Inja, but is forced to withdraw south again the 26th. See, there are problems with 10th Corps retaking the Kansas line because of a repeat performance by ROK 6th Division. Yep, the evening of the 23rd, the PVA 60th and 118th Divisions hit the 3 regiments of ROK 6th Division, and they break again and scatter down the 2 valleys towards 27 Commonwealth Brigade's position, passing through it that evening and assembling like 4,500 men, around half the division, the morning of the 24th, 10 kilometers southwest of Kapyong town. PVA 60th Division then heads toward the U.S. 1st Corps, but PVA 118th Division follows the ROK route and reaches the Australian battalion's position around 10 p.m. I don't think they are aware of the Australians, though, and it's the American Tank Battalion that is first engaged here. The tankers are surprised and forced to withdraw after a firefight, and the Chinese advance and again engage them, as well as the Australians and even the Middlesex Battalion in reserve 2 or 3 kilometers behind the Australians. The Australian defenses are hampered because the ROK charging through a couple hours ago cut the phone wires, so communication with the forward companies is only by radio and only now and then. They also have no artillery support until the morning, not even from a chemical mortar battalion that thinks it's about to be overrun and retreats to Chuncheon, leaving 35 loaded vehicles behind. The Australian battalion and the American tanks, though, manage for the most part to fight off all the nighttime Chinese attacks until battalion headquarters is nearly overrun and battalion commander Bruce Ferguson is forced to pull back towards the Middlesex position. At dawn, the Chinese begin withdrawing and take heavy fire from the troops still on Hill 504. On that hill, artillery support from the New Zealanders gives the Australians the advantage by day, and they fight off Chinese attacks that grow ever weaker. But that Australian position is in danger of being cut off. There's 5 kilometers between them and the Canadians to the west, and the road down to the Middlesex is under constant Chinese fire. So Burke orders Ferguson to withdraw, and the American tanks come back into play, sweeping the road and its surroundings with fire to make that a reality. They stay forward of the Middlesex until it becomes clear that the Chinese are not following. The Chinese at Hill 504 have, in fact, turned their attention to the Canadians, or, more properly, the 2nd Battalion Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry. They get hit over on Hill 677 by mortars and machine guns at 10 p.m., but the New Zealand artillery breaks the large group crossing the river, Canadian artillery breaks the group climbing a gully near the command post, and repeated assaults by 200 or so Chinese are fought back throughout the night. More Chinese arrive over the night, but so too do the American tanks. And by 2 p.m. the next day, Chinese 118th Division has withdrawn and the Kapyong Road is open. That 2 battalions and a tank company had withstood attacks no weaker and perhaps stronger than those that twice routed the ROK 6th Division underscored how completely control had broken down in the division. The huge tally of equipment lost as a result of the division's successive debacles emphasized the breakdown further. They lose 168 machine guns and automatic rifles, 66 rocket launchers, 13 artillery pieces, and 87 trucks. But on top of that, their overturned vehicles blocking roads mean that other units have to abandon stuff. 15 howitzers, 13 mortars, 73 more vehicles, and 242 radios. Hogue does not make Chang a scapegoat, though, and does consider him to be one of the better ROK commanders. It was the lack of anything approaching leadership at the lower command and non-com levels that was the real problem. What about the fight further west? Well, the Gloster Battalion has it rough. It's hit hard enough by the Chinese that James Karn, battalion commander, wants to withdraw west to the Hill 235 area. Company B is too far east to likely accomplish that by night, so they're left isolated until the dawn comes. The Chinese, though, don't follow the main groups of men and turn to assault Company B from all sides. When the dawn arrives, they have to try to disengage from a far larger enemy force, breaking away in small groups to try to make it to Hill 235. Only 20 of them do so. The gap between Hill 235 and the Ulsters and Fusiliers is now like 7 kilometers, so an armor infantry force is sent up Route 5Y the morning of the 24th to fill the gap and reinforce the Glosters. Karn is pretty sure his position can hold out till they arrive, but they can't arrive. The road is too narrow for the Centurion tanks, and the Chinese are sending ever more men to their own positions, and the lighter tanks of the Philippines 10th Battalion Combat Team get stopped by the enemy short of the Glosters late that afternoon. The Chinese have not attacked the Glosters since destroying Company B, but by nighttime, Karn is now warning Brigade Commander Thomas Brodie they will not, in fact, be able to hold out much longer. Karn's men dig in on the crest of the steep Hill 235 by 9 p.m. Meanwhile, to their left, elements of the PVA 64th Army have driven back the ROK 1st Division some 5 kilometers and sent heavy force into the now wide gap between them and the Glosters. The KPA 1st Division has also joined the attack, and by midnight, the entire U.S. 3rd Division front is under attack. The Chinese attack the Glosters time and again, actually taking the peak with the dawn, but losing it again. By then, Chinese moving past the Glosters on both sides have put the assembling relief forces under fire. Already at 5 a.m. the 25th, U.S. 1st Corps Commander Frank Milburn orders withdrawal to the Delta Line, 7 to 18 kilometers below the Kansas line. U.S. 24th and 25th Divisions are to begin doing this at 8 a.m., but ROK 1st and U.S. 3rd are to not do so until the Glosters have been rescued. The regiments of 25th Division reach Delta Line by 6:30 p.m. the 25th. 19th and 21st Regiments from 24th Division also managed to do this and even make contact with ROK 6, finally reorganized and now deployed on the Delta Line at the left of 9th Corps. But the Ranger Company is surrounded and tries to fight its way out, and 5th Infantry Regiment tries to help them. 65 Rangers, mostly wounded, make it out. 5th Infantry then tries to head south and gets stopped by a Chinese roadblock, but they actually manage to find a track leading to another road and make it to Delta Line after dark. During the 25th, a relief force for the Glosters made up solely of light tanks from the 65th Infantry again heads up Route 5Y, and an armored force from ROK 1st also tries to reach them. That force is quickly stopped by the Chinese. And the aerial observer, following the 65th Infantry's tanks, then reports that they have reached the Glosters and are on their way back. This is not correct. They get into a battle short of Hill 235, are threatened with encirclement and withdraw. Already at 9 a.m. though, Brodie has ordered the Glosters to fight their way out. The Ulsters and Fusiliers are to head south on Route 11, covered by the Belgians, and then when they all reach the brigade command post, the brigade will head to the Delta Line. Easier said than done. Karn has ordered the Glosters to withdraw to the southwest, towards ROK 1st Division, whom he thinks are nearby. They have no artillery support since the 45th Field Regiment is under heavy enemy fire. Company A heads off first, Company C support at headquarters soon after, but Company D, who leave last, are worried that by then the Chinese will have spotted the movement. So they leave off the north side of the hill, hit Route 5Y for a short distance, and then go through a lateral valley. Here they're fired upon by Chinese and take shelter in a long, muddy ditch. Following the ditch, and slowly and steadily losing men to enemy fire, they finally see American tanks a few hundred meters away. These are the American tanks sent in by ROK 1st Division that were stopped there in the morning. Those tanks fire on the Glosters though, since they're covered in mud and look like the enemy. Several men are hit before the error is rectified, and 40 men of that company of Glosters can be hauled to safety. The other Glosters are not as fortunate. The trail they follow eventually leads up to a dead end, and there they are surrounded by the Chinese. Trapped, they lay down their arms and are taken prisoner. The Gloster Battalion had numbered 28 officers and 671 men. 21 officers and 500 men were captured, and 622 total were killed in action, wounded in action, or missing in action. When General Ridgway demanded a formal report on the loss of the Gloster Battalion, General Van Fleet replied that in his opinion, all reasonable and possible courses of action had been attempted to save the unit. Van Fleet says more than that though. He will call the Gloucester stand the most outstanding example of unit bravery in modern war, and it has served a real purpose, plugging the giant gap in 29th Brigade's front long enough to prevent the Chinese from exploiting the flanks of ROK 1st and the US 3rd Divisions, and threatening the rear of any Chinese who did advance. Frank Milburn does not intend to make a strong defense at the Delta Line though. To him, it's just a phase line, and already the morning of the 26th, he orders the next withdrawal. But for that, and for the communist drive on Seoul, you will have to wait until next week. I realize some of that happens the second half of this week, but I do not have time to cover it all, so I will just have to backtrack and pick it up then. But boy, so much action. Chinese are really pulling out all the stops, aren't they? Destroying whole UN units too, from the Gloster Battalion to the ROK 6th Division. How many more men do the Chinese have to throw into the fray? How far will they push back the UN forces? Can they retake Seoul again? The questions just keep on coming and coming. But to get some answers, don't miss this week's thrilling conclusion next week. And don't miss our other thrilling productions either, like the Rise of Hitler series on our World War II channel and War to War on our Time Ghost History channel. All of these series are made possible by the Time Ghost Army. You too can join the Army and be a part of all of this at timeghost.tv or patreon.com. These are the newest commissioned officers, and Alexandros Papaspiridis. Papaspiridis. I think I said that right. Well, it's a cool name anyway. That's the Army Member of the Week. If you want to see another Chinese fight, you can click here for the Chinese Civil War. Do not forget to subscribe. See you next time.